Very informal. It's not something that we really planned. We talked about it, but it wasn't something that, I haven't had a chance to go through the English book. But inshallah, we'll start off with, as far as the introduction, we'll go into that later, because the introduction is somewhat long. The author did an introduction, and then we have some of our mashayikh who have also explained the book and who have done different muqaddimats, introductions. And inshallah, we can go through that later because it's some benefit, some extreme benefit. So the name of the book is Al-Hilyah, or Hilyah al-Talib al-Ilm. Hilyah al-Talib al-Ilm. And in English, I think that the book is, the actual definition or translation of this word, Hilyah, is like an adornment. It's like an adornment. So we say the adornment of the student of knowledge. What the student of knowledge should adorn himself with, Hilyah al-Talib al-Ilm. So the Shaykh Bakr Abu Zayd, rahimahullah ta'ala, the first thing that he mentioned in the first chapter is al-Fasl al-Awwal, Adab al-Talib fi nafsihi. The manners or the etiquettes of the student, the behavior of the students with himself, his inner self, right? So a talib is a student of knowledge. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Talibul ilm faridatun ala kulli muslim. That the acquisition of knowledge, seeking knowledge, acquiring knowledge is an obligation upon every single Muslim. And it's something that I like to mention, that many Muslims, for whatever reason, now they have become lazy as it relates to reading and learning and studying. Before we became Muslim, or when we were younger, as Muslims growing up, for those of us who were born and raised Muslim, we used to read a lot, whether it was in school, whether it was on our own, but we used to read. The brothers who became Muslim later on in life, some of the brothers who, learned in the military or incarceration or something like that, they were adamant readers. They used to read because one thing Islam does is it encourages you to learn and study. In fact, the first thing that was told to the Prophet ﷺ was actually a command. The first thing that was revealed from the Quran was Iqra. Iqra. Iqra bismi Rabbi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the Prophet ﷺ to recite, right? To recite, right? Some people say read, and reading can be extracted from this as well, but as we know, the Prophet ﷺ himself, he couldn't read or write. So it has the same implications, right? To busy yourselves with reading and reciting the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Shaykh goes on to say, Al-ilm ibadah, that knowledge is worship. Knowledge is worship. Very important. Very important. Aslu al-usuli fi hadihi al-hilyah bal wa li kulli amrin matlub. So it is the principle of all principles that is inside of this hilyah, inside of this book entitled Al-Hilyah, or this adornment. In fact, and every affair or everything that is required, everything that is required. Now, علمك بأن العلم عبادة. قال بعض العلماء العلم صلاة السر وعبادة وعبادة القلب. He said that with your knowledge that ilm is ibadah, that seeking knowledge is a form of worship. Some of the scholars, they said that knowledge or acquiring knowledge or having knowledge is a secret prayer, and it is the worship of the heart. It is a secret prayer and the worship of the heart. So seeking knowledge is a secret prayer. Because when a person reads, he's reading to understand or to acquire information. It's all the same, no matter what you read. Whether it's a school book, whether it's a newspaper, whether it's something dealing with work or some type of activity, or maybe the person has a hobby or is doing something at home around the house, putting something together or getting a new appliance, whatever the case may be. You're always reading, and the aim of this reading is to understand what it is that you're doing at the time. To understand what it is that you're doing at the time. So, this knowledge is ibadah. It's a form of worship. So you have to have the right niyyah. And it has to be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is something that we should always keep in mind, as we will cover later, bi-idhnillah ta'ala. And it's the ibadah of the qalb, the worship of the heart. Because when a person seeks knowledge and seeks understanding, it's in order for him to get closer to Allah. And he's learning the most important thing that he can learn. And so Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned al-ilm, ibadah, la shak. That ilm is worship, no doubt. بل هو من أجل العبادات وأفضل العبادات حتى أن الله تعالى جعله في كتابه قسيما للجهاد في سبيل الله. So he said that acquiring knowledge is worship, and there's no doubt in this. In fact, it is the most lofty of all forms of worship and the most virtuous form of worship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says concerning this, in his book, he made it a category or a branch of jihad in the path of Allah. So jihad in the path of Allah, just for the people who don't understand jihad is something honorable in our religion. It's not something that we should be afraid of or run away from as it relates to explaining it to the people. We're not talking about terrorism. We're not talking about the irhabi and his thoughts and his movements. No, we're talking about striving in the way of Allah first and foremost, with our hearts, with our souls, but even on the battlefield if it's necessary. And jihad has conditions, and the first of which is that it cannot be done except that it is done under the banner of Islam and under the command of the Amir al-Mu'mineen, the commander and leader of the Muslims, the Amir or the Khalifa, not just anyone who wants to go out and do some silly stuff and call it jihad. Most of the time they do this, and it only brings about corruption, and it causes more harm than good. And many Muslims die or suffer as a result of this. So jihad in this sense, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he made it a branch or a category of jihad in the path of Allah. فقال تعالى وما كان المؤمنون لينفروا كافة فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة ليتفقهوا في الدين ولينذروا قومهم إذا رجعوا إليهم لعلهم يحذرون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, and it is not for the believers to go out all at once or all together, that there should be from every group, a group from every group, those who stay back and learn the religion, and get understanding in the religion in order that they may warn their people when they return back to them. Now, so perhaps they will be warned. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Tawbah, verse 122. You can read this verse and you can go look at the tafsir, and it's very important. You know, we got to start looking at the tafsir. We have to start looking at the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the tafsir of the Quran, so that we don't go away with our own understanding or some twisted, corrupted understanding, or listening to people who think that they know just because they know a little bit of Arabic or even a lot of Arabic, but they haven't studied deen. They haven't made no effort to learn deen. So, ليتفقهوا يعني بذلك الطائفة القائمة. So, ليتفقهوا, in order to gain fiqh in the religion, or understanding in the religion, and we have the word fiqh here, right? Same asl, fiqh, to gain fiqh in the religion. So fiqh is not just how to make wudu, how to pray, how to make tayammum, you know, and things like that. It's understanding, fahmun, to gain understanding, to have understanding in the religion. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and this is as it relates to this group that establishes this. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من يرد الله به خيرا يفقه في الدين يفقه في الدين من يرد الله به خيرا يفقه في الدين. Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants good for, He gives him understanding in the religion. He causes him to understand the religion. Subhanallah. And we look at this, you know, we also should look at this from the bab of mafhum al-mukhalafah. That what we say is, when we look at this, whoever Allah wants good for, He makes him understand the religion. We can also derive from this the opposite. Whoever Allah doesn't want good for, He doesn't allow him to understand the religion. So if you find yourself not understanding the religion, then you have to be humble and be the type of person who says, this addresses to me. I'm the one being addressed in this verse, in this hadith, in this understanding. That if I'm not understanding my religion, it's because Allah doesn't want good for me. And if I want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to want good for me, then I'll make some effort to learn His religion. Right? طالب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم. Seeking knowledge, the acquisition of knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim. So it's an obligation. It's not an obligation for all of us to become ulama, to become scholars. No, that's for a select few people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses those people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks highly of those people. They have a lofty status in this life and in the next life. Kama qala Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهِ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. That verily the ones from the servants, that they only fear Allah, those who are from the ulama. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهِ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء, from the ibad, the slaves and worshippers of Allah, the ones who truly fear Allah are none other than the scholars. Prophet says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, al-ulama warathatul anbiya, that the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets. So they have a lofty status. So this is not for anyone and everyone. So we don't attribute this type of ilm to just anyone. Tafaddal. Go ahead, I'm listening. Okay, the sister just asked a question. Just so you know, we have a group of sisters who are at the halaqah, and they're with us in this lesson. And in fact, may Allah bless them because they're the reason for the lesson. But the sister asked, she said that they're reading, and the way that you could ask is Surah and Naba'a. And Naba'a. They're reading Surah and Naba'a. And one sister said that she can't recite it because she can only take knowledge from one person. Is that correct? Is that what your question? Is that your question? You said the sister said she can't recite. She said that it's not permissible for her. She's not allowed to recite the surah because she can't take knowledge from any and everyone. May Allah help us, but I think the sister is misunderstanding something. She has a misunderstanding. Indeed, we have to be mindful of who we take our knowledge from. Just like the Tabi, Muhammad ibn Sirin, he said, إِنَّ هَذَا الْعِلْمِ دِينٌ فَانْظُرُوا عَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَ دِينَكُمْ. Verily, this knowledge is deen. So look towards who you take your knowledge from. So that's a very important principle. We should be mindful of who we take our knowledge from. But if we're sitting down in a halaqah and we're just reciting Quran, then this is not actually taking knowledge. And as long as the person is not a deviant person who tries to explain the Quran and give their own tafsir, then it's okay for us to sit with people who are better, who have been taught, who know how to articulate the huruf, and who know the ahkam of tajweed and so on and so forth. This is what we need to do, because this is from shaitan. Shaitan is trying to trick people into believing that this is wrong and that's wrong, so they go on through life not knowing. They're only depriving themselves and separating and dividing between the people and misusing principles and putting things in place that don't unite, but they separate. So we have to come together. We have to be united upon the truth, upon the haqq, upon Quran, upon sunnah, upon bir and taqwa. But sitting down and reciting Quran, it's no problem just reciting Quran, as long as you're not, this person is not a person who wants to get tafsir and explain the Quran and may possibly, inculcate or try to add some of the deviant beliefs, along with them. Does that answer your question? Okay, alhamdulillah. Hopefully this is being recorded too, so you can go back to it and share it. Is that recording? Hold on one second, let me check. Okay, let's just. Okay, now. Okay. نستمر. Okay, now. And then he goes on to say, فَإِذَا رَزَقَكَ اللَّهُ الْفِقْهَ فِي الدِّينِ أو في دينه والفقه هنا يعني به العلم الشرعي. So he said that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you from his rizq, has provided you rizq, he mentioned rizq, and this is rizq, sustenance from Allah, fiqh in his deen. And fiqh here, it means the legislative knowledge. Ilm al-Shar'i, legislative knowledge, and that's very important. So when we find ilm being mentioned, in most cases what's being mentioned and what's sought after is the legislative knowledge. This is what's required of us. This is what's required of us, to seek legislative knowledge. فَيَدْخُلُ فِيهِ عِلْمُ الْعَقَائِدِ وَالتَّوْحِيدِ وغير ذلك. فإذا رأيت أن الله من عليك بهذا فاستبشر خيرا لأن الله راد بك خيرا. نعم. Where am I? Okay, now. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the sustenance of understanding his deen, And fiqh here means legislative knowledge. And what enters upon this is the knowledge of aqa'id, the belief, the aqidah, first and foremost. What tawheed, tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And tawheed is the unification of Allah. And our aqidah is tawheed. Our belief is tawheed. The aqa'id, our aqidah is tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Unifying Allah, making Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala one in everything that is specific to Him. And we can go later into the issues of tawheed. And other than that, فَإِذَا رَأَيْتَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ مَنَّ عَلَيْكَ بِهَذَا فَاسْتَبْشِرْ خَيْرًا. And if you see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon you this ilm, this fiqh, fi dinihi, then go away with the glad tidings of goodness. لأن الله أراد بك خيرا. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wants goodness for you. He wants goodness for you. وقال الإمام أحمد العلم لا يعدله شيء لمن صحت نيته. So Imam Ahmed, he said that knowledge, that there is nothing equivalent to knowledge. Nothing equals knowledge when a person when his person's niyyah is correct, when his intentions are correct. So if he has the right intention for seeking knowledge, that there's no equivalence, nothing equivalent to it. قالوا وكيف تصح النية. And they said, then how is the niyyah correct? How is the niyyah correct? Ya Aba Abdullah. Oh, Abu Abdullah. Talking to Imam Ahmed, this was his kunya, Abu Abdullah. So Imam Ahmed was one of the 4 imams. He was one of the 4 imams, and he was the imam of, who they say is the imam of the Hanbali madhab. He is one of our 4 imams, one of the early scholars of the 4 schools of fiqh, jurisprudence. His name was Abu Abdullah. قال ينوي رفع الجهل عن نفسه وعن غيره. And this is very important. هذا هو القصد في طالب العلم. This is the intent behind seeking knowledge. This is the intent behind seeking knowledge. Imam Ahmed, he said when he was asked this question, he says that he has the niyyah of removing ignorance from himself and from other than him. This should be the intent behind seeking knowledge. This is the sole purpose of seeking knowledge. First and foremost, that the person removes ignorance from himself and from other than him. So that a person takes away the barrier of ignorance between him and his Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why we seek knowledge. This is why knowledge is sought, so that we don't remain ignorant. This way people can't just tell us what we should and shouldn't do. We should advise one another, not command one another, especially when we don't know. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge when you don't. Right? We see so much ignorance, and it's causing so many problems in our lives, in society, because of the ignorance of the Muslims. The fathers, the husbands, the wives, the mothers, right? And the mothers, first and foremost, they are half of society, and they give birth to the other half. The woman is half of society, and she gives birth to the other half. Therefore, the woman is all of society. When the Muslim is upright, then the whole society is upright. When the Muslim is on his or her square, everything is good. It's all good in the hood. The Muslim is upright. The Muslim should be the police. The Muslim should be the governors. The Muslim should be the politicians, governing and ruling by the book of Allah and the sunnah of his messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam, policing his environment, Muslims used to keep the environment safe and clean. All right, you didn't see drugs and prostitution and gangs when you had in this Muslim community. They made sure that that was right, that everything around them was right. Why? Because they knew, they had ilm, that this is what should be done. Because they know that this is what's corrupting and causing corruption in society, what's corrupting us and causing us harm and destroying our communities and destroying the world, ignorance. So we don't blame people for the things that they do necessarily. We blame them for being ignorant and not knowing their Lord. Because if you knew your Lord, you wouldn't dare do the things that you do. If you knew your Lord, subhanahu wa ta'ala, his tawheed, his names, his qualities, then you would love him, you would obey him, and you wouldn't dare disobey him. And then he mentions إخلاص النية بالله سبحانه وتعالى. Firstly, making the niyyah pure and sincerely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بقوله وما أمروا إلا ليعبدوا الله مخلصين له الدين حنفاء. This is Surah Al-Bayyinah, verse 5. And we were commanded not, but that we should worship Allah alone, subhanahu wa ta'ala, worship none but Him alone, abstaining from associating anything in worship with Him. And we were not commanded, وَمَا أُمِرُوا, we were not commanded, except that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, making the religion sincerely and purely for Him. Right? I don't think that the book says that. Oh no, I guess it says, does it say that in the English too? Now, Alhamdulillah, Al-Bayyinah, verse 5. Surah Al-Bayyinah, verse 5. وفي الحديث الفرق المشهور عن أمير المؤمنين عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله تعالى عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إنما الأعمال بالنيات. الحديث إنما الأعمال بالنيات. And in the hadith, the famous hadith of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who was the second Khalifa after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned the hadith. He said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, verily the actions are but by the intent. And we know the hadith. And we mentioned it and we read it in the 40 hadith, in our 40 explanations of the 40 hadith. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. That verily the actions are only but by the intent. Meaning that you'll be rewarded for what you intend. The actions are based upon the intent. So your actions, people say things like, Allah knows my heart. And so on and so forth. What about your actions? Because your action is dictating what's in your heart. Right? And this is the most important of the things that we can control, because there's some things that are outside of our control that take a little more work and a little more effort. But the things that we control, we should try our best to do. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He told us, وَمَا أَتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. Whatever the messenger gives you, take it. Whatever he forbids you from, abstain from it. And the Prophet says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whatever I command you with, do as much of it as you're capable of doing. And whatever I forbid you from, abstain from. Right? So the actions are by the intention. A person will get what he intends. So if your intention behind your actions is the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then inshallah this is what you'll get. So then he goes on to say, so if the knowledge is devoid of sincere intention, فإن فقد العلم إخلاص النية انتقل من أفضل الطاعات إلى أحط المخالفات. So if the knowledge is devoid of sincere intention, then it will be transformed or moved towards being from amongst the most noble acts of worship to being one of the lowest forms of opposition. ولا شيء يحتهم العلم مثل الرياء شرك أو رياء إخلاص ومثل التسميع بأن يقول مسمعا علمت وحفظت إلى آخره. Now, so he went on to say, the Shaykh, rahimahullah ta'ala, so he says, so if the knowledge is devoid of sincere intention, if the niyyah is not sincere, then it will be transformed from amongst the most noble and lofty acts of worship to being one of the lowest forms of opposition or violation. And there is nothing that destroys the blessing of knowledge as much as riyah. Riyah, showing off. Be it the riyah of shirk, right? Because he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he feared most from his ummah was the minor shirk, riyah. Or it is the riyah of ikhlas, the riyah of ikhlas. And here we have a footnote in the English book. I'll read it with you just to see what it says. It says the difference between these two is that the first category is when a person embarks upon seeking knowledge or any act of worship initially for the sake of pleasing others in order to show off. As for the second category, it is a shirk lesser than the first one and occurs during the act of worship. Now, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from shirk and all of its manifestations and protect us from riyah. إذا قال قائل بما يكون الإخلاص في طلب العلم يكون في أمور. So a sayer said, someone saying something said, I don't know if this is actually in the other thing. Oh, no, I missed something. I don't think I translated all of this. So he also said, it will go to being that which destroys the barakah. A violation, and there's nothing that destroys the barakah as much as riyah. And then he said also, tasmi', showing something and doing something with the intention of being heard, being seen or being heard. People like to be heard nowadays. They love getting up on the podium or getting behind the camera or the microphone. Now, social media, barakallahu fikum. Why? Because they can. No matter what, how ridiculous they sound or who they put themselves in front of for the sake of being heard or gaining fame, wanting to be something. When if a person really knew the magnitude of this, he would run away from it, run far, far, far away from it. An example of such is the one who carries out this action saying, I know such and such, or I have memorized such and such. I know this, I know that. I don't know. We don't know nothing. We don't know nothing. As soon as you say you know, there's no room to learn. How can you improve upon perfection? I already know. What is there to talk about? At that point, there's nothing else left to talk about. You already know. Huh? It's like, what do you give the person who already has everything? You tell a person something and they know everything. You're wasting your time and affecting your heart. Therefore, adhere to freeing yourself from everything that blemishes your intention, the intention that you have in your heart for seeking knowledge, such as love of standing out and rising above your colleagues and turning them into objects of achieving hidden objectives and attaining worldly pleasures, such as seeking wealth, glory, fame, by way of hearsay, praiseworthiness, seeking marriage. We find people start to get on the mic and start to get up on that minbar a little bit. Now they got 5 or 6 wives, right? SubhanAllah. Praiseworthiness or intending to turn people's faces in your direction for these and other similar things that are such that if they blemish one's intention, they will corrupt it, and the barakah of knowledge will be lost. How many times do we see people who go out and all they want to do is turn people away from other people? And for what? You want to turn this brother away from his brother. You want to turn this sister away from her sister. Why? Just because you feel like you can. Just because you feel like you can. This is from the characteristics of shaitan. Remember what the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about the shaitan. Ya'isa, that he has given up all hope of being worshipped in the Arabian Peninsula, our fil musallin, the people who worship, the people who pray. Shaitan, he already know that they're not going to outright worship him. He's not even worried about that anymore. Shaitan gave up all hope of being worshipped. That's over. That's dead. But he only wants to sow seeds of disunity amongst you. This is his aim and objective. I can't make them outright worship me. Not the Muslims. They're not going to outright worship me, even though they do in their actions and beliefs. And they're not going to actually stand up and make takbir to shaitan and make ruku and sujood to shaitan. But they'll go about separating brothers, destroying brothers and sisters. Hey, man, let's go visit such and such. Let's go see the brother. Let's go see the sister. Okay, come on. What you say we was going? Who else? Khadijah, Muhammad. Oh, no. I see you. Huh? You was all ready to go. Now you don't want to go. Why? No. It's a problem. What's wrong? Did they do something to you? Is something I need to know? No, it's just, I don't know. I don't know. It's just something about it. It's just something about it. How often do we see that? These people need to be called on that. They need to be called on. They don't need to be excused. They don't need to be whatever. They need to be called on it. They need to be checked on it because they are a cancer in the ummah. So, now, for this reason, it is incumbent upon you to protect your intention, your niyyah, from all the traces of seeking with your knowledge the pleasure of others besides Allah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. Yet it is incumbent to be aware of the things which lead to these evil qualities. So we don't seek knowledge for nothing but the sake of Allah. We don't learn knowledge just so we can go and become something and get paid for something, and all of a sudden we got videos and all of that kind of stuff. That shouldn't be the intent. If this is something that just so happens to occur, then it's from the qadr of Allah. Right? Allah chooses whom He wills. Whoever wants that shouldn't do that. Whoever strives for that shouldn't be him. It shouldn't be her. The leader is the one who's pious. The leader is the one who's selected. The leader is the one who the people say should be our leader. The people feel that this is going to be the best leader for us. Right? Not the person who's so anxious to get out in front, talking just because he has a mouth. Talking just because she has a mouth. No. So there are a number of sayings and occurrences, the Sheikh said, that I mentioned at the beginning of the first chapter of my book, Ta'alum. And I would also like to add to the previous list the prohibition of scholars on the issue of let me make sure that this is lining up. Okay, now, so he let me go back to what the Sheikh said about this before we go back to the book. Let me just see if we can. The Sheikh brought something that's beneficial. He said, إذا قال قائل بما يكون الإخلاص في طالب العلم. He said, with what can you bring? With what what do we have as an example for ikhlas, sincerity in seeking knowledge? يَقُولُ فِي أُمُورٍ. He said that it occurs in matters or different affairs. He said, الأمر الأول أن تنوي بذلك امتثال الله، امتثال أمر الله، امتثال أمر الله، لأن الله تعالى أمر بذلك فقال فاعلم أنه لا إله إلا الله إلى آخره الآية. فاستغفر لذنبك. It's not here, but that's the conclusion of the verse. يحث سبحانه وتعالى على العلم والحث على الشيء يستلزم. Nah, this. I don't know if I translate this, but he said the first affair is. Oh yeah, nah. The first affair is that the person that the person intends with this carrying out the order of Allah, carrying out the order of Allah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered that. He ordered or commanded with that. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَاسْتَغْفِرُ لِذَنبِكَ. He says, so no, it is a must that you know, K-N-O-W, that nothing has a right to be worshipped except Allah, to the end of the ayah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he encouraged, he gave an incitement towards ilm. He said, فَاعْلَمْ. He said it's a must that you know. He commanded you to know, to acquire the knowledge that nothing has a right to be worshipped except Allah. So Allah encouraged this. He incited the people to acquire knowledge. And this hath ala shay, this encouragement upon something, it mandates muhabbatahu wal-rida bihi wal-amr bihi. He said that this necessitates love for a thing. That if Allah incites you towards something, it necessitates love for that thing and being pleased with that thing and acting in accordance with that thing or commanding with that thing. And the second thing that he mentioned, I think that we'll probably suffice with that. I think that will suffice with that. I see the brothers that went to sleep in here. Sisters probably sleep too. Okay, sisters woke. These dudes need pillows. So yeah, we'll suffice with that, unless we'll suffice with that. We gave the first order or the first affair, that which brings about sincerity, that which is sincerity in seeking knowledge. So هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Everybody want to wake up when the class is over. The hell when I put okay, do we have any questions? Let's see if we have any questions from the people online. I'm trying to turn the camera on. Hey, can you see the button to turn the camera on? Oh, shoot. Yes. Yeah, inshallah, I'll do that. I went live on Facebook on the I don't know if it's Al-Haqq or Masjid Al-Haqq. I think that's where I went live at. But I'll send the link inshallah. So see if anybody had any questions online. I don't think so. So there are no questions from the sisters? Alhamdulillah. May Allah accept. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. No questions, brother. No questions. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.